The military taught me to have that never give up mentality. And that mentality, I think, just has helped me in a big way. At first, I didn't apply it to real estate. I didn't think that way like an entrepreneur. But thinking back about how, when you're in combat, like it's just not an option to give up, right? It is just not an option. Other people are depending on you to perform. And so, when you think about that in real estate, like most situations you're going to be in real estate are not going to be that bad, right? And you can still go forward. Yeah. So all that to say, we pushed forward in a big way and just had to commit in a big way as well.
Welcome to the Real Estate Mindset Podcast, hosted by Eric Nelson and brought to you by Wild Oak Capital. Eric is a real estate investor, business owner, and performance coach. Throughout this series, Eric explores the mindset behind why certain investors are so successful and how we can learn from their achievements and failures. Eric asks the tough questions around the habits, discipline, mindset, and more required to achieve the most ambitious goals. Thank you for being here and enjoy the show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Real Estate Mindset Podcast. This is your host, Eric Nelson. And today, great honor, such a pleasure to have an amazing podcaster himself on my show, Whitney Sewell. Well, Whitney, thanks for being here.
My pleasure, Eric. Happy to be here.
All right, on. So, I kind of do the same thing most podcasters do. If you could just kind of give us a little background of where you started, where you're from. I think I know quite a bit, but we'll let you tell the story and then dive into some questions. So where'd you start and what led you to real estate?
Yes, I appreciate, again, Eric, your time and inviting me on, and honored to be here. I go back to March of 2001. And I say March because it was that year, if most of you remember, that we were attacked 6 months after that. And that March is when I decided to join the military. And obviously I had no idea that in just a short period of time, I would be spending a year of my life in Iraq, toting around a machine gun, praying every day I get to go home. And, unfortunately, not everyone in my squad, made it home. And so I'm very thankful to be here. The Lord definitely protected me and has blessed my time overseas and allowing me to come home. But when I got home, Eric, I had no idea what I was going to do for a career. I mean, I grew up in a little bitty town, one stoplight. I just wasn't exposed to entrepreneurship and, all the possibilities out there. I mean, I just had no idea. And so I came home from Iraq and I thought, you know what? I love the uniform, the discipline, the structure, all those things. I thought law enforcement seems like a great path, right? And so I applied with Kentucky State Police, and there were 1,200 applicants for 5 positions. And I was blessed to have one of those. And I loved working the road as a police officer. I would have done it for free the first couple of years, or first year, I'll say. Anyway.
Let's put a cap on it.
Yeah. But I tell you what happened, though, is that I got married, within the first year in, and figured out that, hey, I'm just passing my new bride in the hallway. The first whole year of marriage, we just passed each other in the hallway, and so finally I was like, okay, this is not what's best. I've got to figure something out. I had no college and I just felt like, what can I do? I almost felt helpless, like, what can I do? What's even an option for me? I just felt helpless because I'd been taught that I had to have college or just to think that way. I would say not from my mom, but that, she really encouraged me in every way to go after it. But I just mean just everybody around me, it was just like, you got to have college. It was just assumed. And so I just thought, what can I do? I saw guys retiring from law enforcement that had been there 25 years that were making, like 35,000 or maybe 40,000 a year. And I just thought, wow, I finally, it just started hitting me that that's where I was headed. There was no room for growth. And that's when I started seeking for some way to supplement my income. It was 2008-ish, 9, some in there, and started learning about real estate. And you know what, Eric, I figured out that it's not like 1 or 2 people built wealth in real estate. Like millions of people have built wealth in real estate. And I thought, okay, if all those people can do it, I can probably figure something out. I can probably do something in real estate to supplement, our income. We wanted my wife to be able to stay at home when we had children. And so it was going to be difficult, though, on say $25,000, $30,000 a year, maybe 35 to 40 if I worked all the overtime I possibly could, just the worst schedule. But right then I said, okay, you know what, we can do this. We bought 2 triplexes, made a ton of mistakes. I self-managed while working full time. While we bought a house, we were remodeling while living in it, which is not recommended for your first year of marriage, by the way, for the listener. And my poor bride was doing dishes in the tub for way too long. It was horrible. So it's quite stressful, but anyway, we made it. We made it through it. But we bought those triplexes. We learned so much the hard way. And then I then became a federal agent, moved to Virginia, where we still live now. And I bought and sold some smaller things, but still, I just still had the blinders on. I had no idea about this syndication thing. Like I didn't even know that was an option for me. I really thought, like, I don't know who those guys are that can buy, a $20 million project. Like I just would never have guessed that was me at that time. Finally, I was, believe it or not, I was a professional horse trainer as well. I was a federal agent, professional horse trainer. I had a 15-unit building at this time as well that I was partially managing with a partner. And it was, again, the writing was on the wall. Okay, this is not what's best. I just can't keep doing this, working all these hours. My wife and I were on the beach one fall, and we were just really thinking about that. Like, where do we see ourselves 3 years from now, 5 years from now? Are we going to keep doing this like this? And it was immediate no, right? It just wasn't worth it. It was not worth it. No matter how much more money I was making good money training horses, and I was selling horses for more money than I ever imagined. It was a passion of mine since I was a little boy, to be a cowboy, right? And I was finally doing it at a very high end, very high level, building a brand similar to like I have in real estate, not this big, but close, and doing clinics all over the country. And I say all that because I want you to know how big of a deal it was when my wife and I decided that it was best for us to sell the farm. And so we did. We came home from that trip. It was like September. We had our farm on the market, like in September, I'll say, September, October timeframe. We sold our house between Christmas and New Year's. Of all times, you can imagine how crazy that was. But
yeah, it's a tough time to move.
It was horrible. However, I knew that it was going to take that level of commitment to make it in the syndication space. And also before this, I started going to some real estate conferences. And again, Eric, my eyes were opened to the people who were buying buildings like this. I thought, well, they've only been in the business a year or two, and they're buying a $20 million project. Hey, if they can do it, I can do it as well. Right. And so I said, you know what, we're going to go make this happen. And that's really where the commercial real estate journey began. We sold the 15-unit. We sold our farm. We were also pursuing our third adoption process, which was extremely expensive. And we knew that. Worth every penny, of course. But we still had to figure out at that time where that money was going to come from. And then we started our commercial real estate business. We bought a small house in town. I built an office in the basement, and that is honestly where I practically lived for more than 2 years. And from 5 a.m. till midnight most nights. It was just quite intense, doing a daily podcast. I was still working full time. And every other Monday, my team that I built knew that they better schedule at least 12 to 15 interviews for our daily podcast. And I would just do interviews back to back to back to back all day long. We called it my marathon day because I would be on other people's podcasts and take calls the same day. It was insanity, to say the least. But I was just like, okay, if that's what it takes, let's just keep going forward. And I forgot a crucial point, which I think will hit home with your podcast, Eric, is when I was in the military. Something I talk about a lot is the military taught me to have that never give up mentality. And that mentality, I think, it just has helped me in a big way. At first, I didn't apply it to real estate. I didn't think that way like an entrepreneur. But thinking back about how, when you're in combat, like it's just not an option to give up, right? It is just not an option. Other people are depending on you to perform. And so, when you think about that in real estate, like most situations you're going to be in real estate are not going to be that bad, right? And you can still go forward. Yeah. So all that to say, we pushed forward in a big way and just had to commit in a big way as well. And from selling the farm to moving in town and to probably not the best area of town as well. It's an unfortunate reality at that time. My boys knew that they wouldn't see me till almost Sunday most weeks, maybe Saturday afternoon. And I was traveling a lot as well to conferences and whatnot. But now I do have more time. Now I get to spend more time with the family, and it took us a few years to make that happen. But now we're here. We bought over $100 million last year in real estate. I mean, we're fixing to launch a large fund. I mean, there's a lot happening now at LifeBridge Capital.
Oh, that's so cool. So there's a lot that you said there, and I like to start with saying, first of all, thanks for your service. I mean, that's first and foremost incredibly valuable, and thank you for that. I mean, there's not enough thank you can say there. So very cool. But I would like to touch on a bunch of other stuff that you said there.
Please.
You kind of circled back to it because like the military provided this discipline. And then you said, even as you went into law enforcement, you kind of liked that discipline. And so I think, this is a mindset podcast, but I do think about that a lot is what's the type of person or what does it take to succeed? Not even necessarily in real estate. I mean, syndication is kind of a long haul type look at it. So it takes it, I think, more than other industries, but you kind of touched on that. I mean, I think what you gained from the military is incredibly valuable. Yeah. Just like the never give up drive. And the other thing that you mentioned that I thought was really cool is, you guys made the really tough decision to sell the farm, which, at the time sounds like, might have broke your heart a little bit even. You kind of built this thing and it was a passion.
We were both crying as we pulled out of the driveway the last time. We were in two separate vehicles. We were on the phone. We were just both crying. It was horrible, but man, yeah, it did take that level of commitment though.
Yeah. But I think you took action because you hear people say, oh, I'll do that or I want to do that. And then, for me, it depends, if they're asking for advice, I usually won't say something. If they're asking for advice, it's like, well, okay, then what are you going to do about it? What is the action you have to take? And for you to do that is really cool. And I guess we might as well just dive in here. I mean, we've mentioned you a handful of times on the show. In fact, I had a guest who kind of credits their early success to actually talking with you. So I'll share that. I'll share that in the notes, and then I'll send it to you in a link. But
awesome.
Really cool. Like you kind of inspire a lot of people because you have a daily podcast, which is, I think you're over 1,000 now, if I remember right.
We are.
That's inspirational to all podcasters. I mean, even a week seems like kind of a lot, but every day is just incredible. So congrats to you. And what's happened is a lot of people have heard a lot of education from you. So all of that hard work, you're kind of paying it forward. So thanks for doing that.
My pleasure. It's not been easy, but I'm thankful we've done
it. Yeah, I bet. And then the last thing I wanted to say was that, you and I have a very similar trajectory. My wife and I put her through similar pain. I mean, I wanted to find a way to have some, started with saying kind of retirement thing. I worked for myself. So it's like, okay, well, how can I build some kind of retirement? And then as I grew and grew and grew, it was like, actually what I really want is to replace my income. So we did something very similar, bought a few single families. Yeah, we fixed it up, living there. I'm kind of the whole thing, and then bought a sixplex, spent a ton of time fixing it up, bought a triplex. We still live in that today, actually. But just finally, it took like getting banged over the head a bunch of times and some good coaching and a good friend for me to find the syndication space as well. Because for me, it was so foreign. Just like you said, it's like, how could I possibly buy, even 2 million, let alone 20 million, right? So we were talking about this in the pre-show a little bit. I was at a conference this weekend, and everyone there is either doing or trying to do that same thing. And what's fun about what you mentioned was there's thousands of people out there successful. So it's absolutely doable. So that's kind of one of the takeaways I took from what you said. So can you touch on what it's like to do the podcast? I mean, you did a little bit. Is it worth it? Do you look at it? Is it worth it? It's been a pretty long journey, I'm sure.
I get that question often. Whitney, has it been worth it to do a daily show? And obviously now it's easy to look back and say, of course, without a doubt, it's been so worth it. However, the first year, the second year of it, I mean, it was questionable the whole time, right? Like, man, I'm just killing myself here nearly. I mean, it was quite the grind. I mean, to say the least, it was extremely difficult. And I say that also, I don't want to paint a rosy picture for anyone. You do have to think about, well, how fast do you want to get there? Everybody talks about how much your network is connected to your net worth. And, if I'm meeting 7 times as many people per week as you are, well, I don't know if there's a direct correlation in math there to your net worth, but there's definitely some connections there, that are made, that happen, right? How fast you want to get there. However, It could be a cost, and one thing I did not realize was the commitment it was going to take from not only myself, but my wife and my kids. And, my wife did everything in the home for those nearly 2 years. I mean, almost no help from me whatsoever. I mean, I missed most meals with the family, as well. I mean, it was madness. Right. And so when I say that, I say, if you're still working full time, you're doing deals and you're going to do a daily podcast, man, you better buckle up, especially if you have a family. It's not an easy task. So it may not be worth it. You know what I mean? Like, you're missing a lot. And I missed a lot. And I'm thankful it has worked out now, and I have a lot more time with family now, but you do have to think through that a little bit. Right. And I just didn't know. I mean, ultimately in the very beginning, I'm like, hey, if that's what it takes, let's just go make it happen, and that's just the way I thought about it. Hey, don't tell me how difficult it is. I mean, I was at 2 different conferences early on, right before I launched a podcast, Eric, and I met with 2 individuals that everybody listening would know. I mean, very big names in our space, just in real estate. And I was telling both of them about the daily podcast, and then both of them said, Whitney, what are you doing? That's crazy. Why would you do that? And so I thought, okay, because of who they are, maybe I should reconsider this, and however, I had a great mentor, and I was talking to him about it. He was like, I mean, it was almost this simple. He was like, well, that's why you have to do it, because it's too much work for most people. I'm like, okay, now I'm back on track. Now I'm moving forward again. However, again, yes, it is a massive commitment, not just for you, but for your whole family, for everybody that supports you. I mean, I'm very active in my church, and I had to say no to like everything outside of Sunday morning. Like, I just had to get good at any friends that want to do anything. I just had to say, I'm sorry. I mean, for like 2 years, I just can't right now. And it meant taking investor calls at 5 a.m., 5 to 7 before I would go to my day job, and getting home and doing more interviews. And, it was just madness. So, but was it worth it? If you looked at a profit and loss statement, absolutely not. Absolutely not. If you just looked at a profit and loss. However, if you look at our overall business, without a doubt, it's been more than worth it. The Lord's used it in a big way.
Well, that's really cool. I mean, I think one takeaway I'll say is a lesson that I would say for our listeners to take away is really get on the same page with your wife or spouse, whatever it might be. So your wife sounds like a saint, and I'll say my wife's the same. I work just pretty long hours. I'm kind of I have 2 young kids, but I will say we got that advice early on to get on the same page. Are you both ready? Because yes, technically speaking, I'm doing the work, right? I'm doing all the calls, underwriting, all the stuff. It's a lot of work, but she's doing just as much to support me and our kids as I build the brand. And it's fun to talk to you and really pick your brand. That's the way I love the podcast so much, is I can look and say, hey, all right, there's a grind. There is light at the end of the tunnel. I'm excited about it. I mean, I don't really see it as a grind. I love real estate. I love talking about it. The conference this weekend, same story. I went alone. My kids and my wife stayed home. My in-laws came. They're amazing to help out a little bit. Point is, we're on the same page. And she's like, yeah, I'm in for it. She kind of has a personality. She's like, not forever. It better pay off. But, it's just a lesson that our listeners can take away. If you want to start a new venture of any kind, get on the same page with your wife. And then I think one thing we haven't really touched on, we probably will later in the mindset portion of this, is start with the end in mind and have that why and that drive. Because if you don't have a good reason to push, it'll fade. You're not going to stick with it.
Can I just say something on that right there? There's 2 things: our mission and what you said, like having that vision. I think during our process of just when we were just every day, just grinding, trying to make it happen, it was important. And I didn't know it then, but I figured it out during the process. But it's important that you can paint that vision for even your children, right? Like my boys, it was always like, oh, we're going to get to do something today. I'm sorry. Like, I just can't, and one of the hardest parts, Eric, when I would be in the dungeon, I called it, like in our basement in this old house where I built this office. And there was this little bitty window up at the top, old house, like the little window in the basement, you can look out at the top. And I would see my boys playing in the backyard, as I'm doing all those shows or whatever. And that was so difficult for me because I would see, and I'd see them and I think, you know what, I want to be out there playing with them, and I just had to keep that vision in mind, where we're going, and we're going to be back out on a farm, eventually. And I didn't know how long that would be, but I had to paint that vision for them too, so they could see where we're going. We might get into it, we might not, but our mission, our big why behind LifeBridge Capital was also very important, and is strongly tied to the success and, and just keeping us driven forward as a family as well.
Well, that's a really good transition because, my next question was, can you tell us about LifeBridge? Tell us what you're doing, market you're in, what you've been up to, all that stuff. So now's your chance to pitch it, but also, keep that vision in mind as well. I mean, people are listening that are potentially looking for somewhere to go. And obviously I respect you and your vision a lot, but again, I know who you are. Kind of tell us all about that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Eric. And so when my wife and I moved to Roanoke, this is when I had just become a federal agent. We grew up in a very small town, not much exposure to a lot of things. I mean, until I became a police officer, of course, went overseas, all that. But we went to this church as pastor was talking about adoption and caring for orphans and widows. And those, we had never been exposed to adoption before. We had never had a discussion around adoption before. That was never, I didn't know anybody that had been adopted or had adopted. However, on our way home from that event, we were just like, why would we not adopt? That sounds like an amazing thing to do. Why would we not? It seemed that simple, right? And so within a week, we turned in our application to adopt from Ethiopia. And 2 years later, it's a horribly long process, but well worth it, by the way. Our first son, Samuel, came home from Ethiopia. A year later, we started another process right away thinking, hey, it's probably going to be 2 more years. Let's go ahead and start again. We did. Well, 9 months later, our second son, Elijah, came home through adoption as well. And then we also have a daughter now that's 2 years old that came to our family through adoption. And so just many roller coaster rides through the adoption process, but so well worth it. The financial burden of adoption, most people have no idea, it can cost 40 to 60 grand to bring a child home to adoption. There's over 150 million orphans in the world. It's a shame. However, it's not the children's fault. And many couples, and we talk to many couples now that are pursuing adoption, but often they say, well, Whitney, that's more than I'm making a year. How can we pursue adoption? And so that's where we started the LifeBridge Foundation, and we committed half of our personal profits, to that foundation to help these families in a big way. So they commit, to bringing their child home. And so they commit to adoption. We help them with fundraising, things like that. So that's the LifeBridge Foundation, but that's the big mission and vision behind LifeBridge Capital. And that was from the beginning, that was our plan. That was what we were doing. And obviously that's our, like I said, the mission behind LifeBridge Capital. But LifeBridge Capital is buying, multifamily. We're doing some development now, but our bread and butter has been value add multifamily. I would say, late 70s, early 80 model, vintage multifamily, anywhere from $15 to $40 million purchase price, preferably 100 units or more, but in Colorado and some in Boise, Idaho as well.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. I mean, I knew that about you guys, and that's just an incredible story. I mean, first of all, so cool that you guys adopted and spent the time and energy and money to, bring some kids into your life and family, and of course, give them an amazing home. And then to help people with that process as well. I mean, it's just truly incredible. So if you're listening to the show, you're a passive investor, look a little harder at these particular folks, just my opinion. That's so cool. And then if you're ready to, I don't know if you're there yet, but are you ready to discuss the fund that you're building, or is that something still in the works and maybe save for a later date?
Yeah, I may not go into a ton of details, but I will say, it will be launching very soon, and it will, it'll be buying some development. We'll plan to have about a third of development projects in that fund, and then the rest will be value add multifamily, just like, what we have in Colorado now.
Got it. And do you think you're going to like that model a little bit better rather than single asset raises?
So there's, some investors say there's pros and cons, right? And they think it's like a blind fund. We do already have 2 projects under contract that will go into the fund. So one thing I like about that is that investors can see the first 2 projects, and that will be in that fund. And that's one of the biggest holdups I've heard investors say. But a fund model I do like so far. I do really like, because not only are you gaining that geographical diversification, right? I mean, our investors are going to have properties in numerous markets in the West. But they're also gaining cash flow diversification, right? So let's say in a fund, a small fund, let's say it has 5 projects to make it easy. Well, one may be behind projections, right? For whatever reason, right? But then you may have 2 that are hitting projections and 2 that are ahead of projections. Well, instead of that investor having all his eggs in one basket and that one that's behind projections, well, now, his 50,000 or 200,000, whatever it may be, is spread across all 5 projects. And so he never feels that dip in that one specific property. And so he's diversified then across markets, types of deals, even in this fund, some development, while majority will be value add.
I like it. I think the one con that you hear a lot of people talk about with respect to funds is kind of the desperate nature to find a deal. If you have the fund funded, and let's say, you sell an asset, or maybe, it falls out of contract, whatever it might be, that's the desperation to find something because that money is expensive. So, I don't normally put my own kind of personal opinions in the show very much, but what I will say about it is I've heard Joe Fairless say the same thing. He's moving to the fund model as well. And he was asked the question, who is this for? And he, if you know Joe, I'm sure you do, he's a pretty thoughtful person. He said, you need to have at least 3 or 5 full cycles. You really need to understand this business. And so the opinion I'll say here is, if you're listening to this and you're a new syndicator, this is just my opinion, that fund model is somewhat dangerous. You need to be someone like Joe or Whitney who can find those deals. Do you agree with what I'm saying?
I do agree. And so there's different ways to operate a fund to minimize that risk, right? And so let's say, if Joe's doing a $150 million fund, he knows enough about his capital raise process to understand about how fast that capital is going to come in. He also, his team, I know, and just to be completely transparent, I know Joe very well. We talk very often. And so I understand his fund pretty well, and just his business structure. But anyway, great guy, by the way, and very thoughtful, just a top-notch guy. But a fund like that, they're very established, like Ashcroft and, his group, where they understand how much deal flow they have too, right? They have an expectation of deal flow. And so they can manage that fairly well. Or very well, actually. And so as a fund, if you're very inexperienced and you're not sure about your deal flow, then maybe you get a deal under contract and you open your fund and you close it at, if you're raising 10 million, then you shut it off at 12, and you close that fund, where you may plan to raise 20 or 30 or 50 million, but there's ways to close it off and say, okay, we're not accepting any more funds right now. We're going to wait 2 months and then we'll open it back up. Right. So there's different ways around that. But yes, I agree. You need to have done some deals. You need to have an expectation of deal flow, and have a very good understanding of your investor base, right? How much capital can you raise? How consistently have you done that? How many repeat investors do you have? How much, are your investors going to be on board with you? Do they love investing with you, even though they don't know the deal? Because that's some investors may have invested with you 3 times, but all of a sudden they're like, oh, wait a minute. I don't know what the deals are going to be, so I'm probably not going to invest. There's just some that are going to have that objection, So it's just doing enough deals, doing enough raises, having enough deal flow, so you know how to manage it well.
I like it. Cool. Well, thanks for being so transparent. I thought I would touch on that a little bit. So the second part of the show, as we talked about, is kind of based in mindset. So I'm just going to fire some questions at you. There's no right answer. I just like to do it to kind of gauge, where the people I have on the show, what they do. So my first question is, do you have a morning routine? Aside from the times when you were getting up and recording a million podcasts, but day to day for now, do you have a morning routine?
Yes, it's very important. Do you want me to talk about it a little bit?
Yeah. What's your routine? If you don't mind sharing.
I think ultimately when I started to have a more structured morning routine is when my life and business started to change. I mean, it was before we started the commercial real estate business, but it was probably a year before. Actually, if I think back, it was probably roughly a year before. And I read The Miracle Morning. I mean, I did. I read that book. I can't even remember how I came upon that book, but I thought I should read that. That's, I did, and I don't do everything in that book. However, it made me think about how I'm spending my time. Am I sleeping in every morning? Hey, there's so much time there where I could be educating myself, or I could be exercising, or I could whatever, right? There's so much time there. And it's that consistency over a long period of time, right? That just adds up to big things. You think, well, this 10 minutes today doesn't really add up to much. Well, no, but you do that 10 or 15-minute thing every day for 2 years, you've learned a lot, or you've covered a lot of ground, or whatever it may be, right? So I did. I started saying, okay, I'm going to be up at 5 o'clock every morning. I started, reading scripture and reading some educational book or business book or something like that. And that started helping motivate me, right? Opening my eyes to entrepreneurship and things that I could possibly achieve, right? That I was not exposed to before, and really just on a consistent basis of educating myself. It begun that, and then that changed over time. But now, or I would say even through when we started the podcast, the rougher years, I'll call it, more intense times, that morning routine was crucial. That my wife and I, she also became an early riser during that time. And what we found is, hey, that's almost our favorite time of the day. Like, obviously we love our kids, but they're in the bed, right? And so it's more time for her and I to just chat and connect. And often at that time, my day would start, really early. I might take calls. I would go to my federal agent position at 7. And so I may take calls from 6 to 7 or 5 to 6, if somebody scheduled a call, I would have that open. But if not, it was a time for her and I to read together, to pray together, but also just to connect, to say, how you doing? Like what's happening this week, or maybe with this child, or, that was crucial. But even now we still love that time. We're still early risers, and it just so important that, we're up, we're fixing coffee, we're reading. Often I'm even riding a horse now, before I start my real estate day, in our business. And so just time of thinking. And something else I've learned, Eric, during that time is thinking time is so important. You got to have time to just think about your business and be above it, right? And kind of seeing the whole picture and how's this operating over here, just thinking through things is so important. And so, because I can easily just get bogged down. My team will fill my calendar with appointments. And before I know it, like I just can't even think about anything else but appointments all day long, and so that morning routine, though, has just changed everything, and how I structure, my day, thinking through my day and being ready for the day.
Oh yeah. I love that answer. So that's the reason I asked the question. Everyone has a different, style answer, whatever it might be. But for me, the reason I even have this question in the show is because a lot of times people who are struggling for the next step, let's say, or maybe won't take action, that little simple thing is think about how your day is structured, think about how your morning is structured. And just like you said, what time are you wasting? And then what could you squeeze in there? A book called Atomic Habits talks about that. I mean, small change, like you said, might be 10 minutes, adds up to huge differences over time. So I love that. And then one other thing you said was consistency. I mean, that's time and time again. I hear that with successful people is, I'm just consistent. Where someone else gets tired of doing that thing, I'm just going to do it. They might not be the most fun every day, but I'm going to do it. And over time, yeah, it'll pay dividends. So I love that answer. That actually leads me to my next question is what books are you reading, and what books can you recommend?
Yeah.
For those
reaching to the shelf.
It's on YouTube, so people watching will see that. But the audio version, I'll just say he's turning around and grab books.
I'm grabbing books off the shelf. That's right. One I've been recommending a lot lately. I've recommended it the last couple of years at different times, and I've gone back through a lot of it recently. Is The Road Less Stupid by Keith Cunningham. And
I've never heard of this. This is awesome.
He is the one that got me thinking about thinking time. And I mean, after the end of every chapter, he'll say that's something for you to think about. And, he encourages you to have thinking time after every chapter. I mean, it's a amazing entrepreneur, real estate guy. It's just a great business book to help you to think a lot. Another one recently recently I read Never Lose a Customer Again. That'll get you thinking about how you're treating your investors. I want to treat our investors. I want them to have like the just top notch, every touch that we have with them. I want it to be just the most professional, the best we can possibly make it. I mean, I got somebody on our team that's all they do is monitor what I call the investor life cycle, and thinking through that. And this book has been helpful in that just recently. Another one, if you want to get motivated, which I like, is The Power of Self-Discipline, No Excuses by Brian Tracy. I enjoy just even listening to part of this book, a couple of times a month. I don't have to go through the whole thing now, but man, just listening to him every once in a while as he reads this, I'm just like, okay, I needed that kind of kick in the tail, but anyway, there's a few books that have been really good recently.
I like it. Yeah, those are 3 new ones for the show. So this is great. My list gets longer every time I interview someone, but super good. So you touched on this a little bit. I always ask the question, have you ever had a coach or a mentor? And if you paid for it, was it worth the investment?
Yes. And yes, for sure. So I did. I did a lot of research on a mentor, and it was during that same time, Eric, when we were selling the farm, that I went to my first conference. And that's when my eyes were open to like all these people again, they were buying 100 unit complexes, and they'd only been in the business a year or two. And I thought, okay, if they can do it, I can do it. But hey, I need a coach. I don't know where to even start hardly. I know I can figure it out, but I know I can get there faster and be more successful. I have, somebody helping me, right? That's already been there and done that. But, we're not wealthy people. And it was a lot for us to think about spending that much money on a coach, and so we were also pursuing our third adoption process. So we knew that was going to be probably $50,000 there. So we're like, we don't even know where all this money's going to come from. I mean, the Lord provided every penny, but still, at that time I thought, oh, is this worth it? Should I do this? And it's been so worth it. However, not all coaches are created equal. Okay. I encourage you to go to conferences where that mentor or coach is speaking and get to meet them right before you write a big check. Right. And I tell you, one other thing that I did at that time was I got on Bigger Pockets. I found people that were in these programs or working with these people and said, what's your experience? Or are you willing to get on a phone call with me? And a few were, and so I asked, what's been your experience? And guess what? Some say, hey, don't do it, or some have great experiences. And so you're going to hear from, different sides of the coin there, and you want to, right? But ultimately, I wanted to find somebody. Here's a few things. I wanted to find somebody that was still in the business, not somebody that was successful 10 years ago and still coaching now. I wanted them to be in the business, and I wanted somebody that I could speak to directly. That was just something I wanted. There's tons of very successful coaching programs that have coaches under the main, mentor or mentee, whatever the main guy or gal, and that they, mentor lots of people under lots of other coaches. I didn't prefer that model for myself. I wanted, somebody that I could speak to one-on-one. And then just somebody that I felt like cared about my success, right? That they weren't just a salesman, of their program. They weren't just in it for coaching. And so just 3 important things, that I looked for at that time, and a few ways of how I did it. And no doubt, I would not have been as successful without a coach. Yeah, and I have numerous coaches, by the way. That was one coach at that time, but I've had numerous coaches over the last few years.
No, I agree. I mean, I pitch this basically every show. I love coaching, and it's morphed for me over time. Again, I had 2 coaches as well. One was very practical. I could ask any question about real estate, super knowledgeable. He's great. My current coach, I always give him a shout out, Jens Nielsen. He actually does care about your success. So I think I'll be with him long-term because it's this never-ending growth is how I see it. But yeah, I mean, there's an investment there for sure. But I will say, I think in my opinion, to have someone guiding you along the way and someone you can ask questions, to me, it's incredibly valuable. So I appreciate you being so open and honest about that.
It gives you another layer of confidence that you didn't have before when you have that person on your team.
Yeah. And you could say, hey, were you feeling this when you were doing this? And like, yeah, that's exactly how I felt. Or here's someone you can talk to, or yeah, here's how I got through that struggle. I mean, yeah, it's kind of cool. And I think the most important thing for me is being so introspective. I've never in my life looked at myself so hard. And it's only because he's asking those tough questions. It's like, you think you can ask those of yourself, but if someone's asking you, why do you look at it like that? For some reason, to me, it makes me look harder and figure out a way to get there. I always kind of pitch it. So what's something that you've done that you would not repeat that our listeners can learn from you?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I'm happy now we sold the farm, right? But so something I would not repeat though is probably I would go back to 2009 and I would say be newly married while, or no, I'm happy that I was married at the time, but I didn't want to focus on that. But being newly married and buying, those two triplexes and remodeling a house at the same time. I would not recommend doing all that right out of the gate. As soon as you get married, it's just, it's just difficult, right? A new marriage. And I mean, we made it, thank the Lord, but we learned a lot, the hard way. And it didn't have to be that difficult, at the time. That's probably way back when, people getting started. That's just, yeah, I would probably have changed that because you lose all that. I lost all that time with my bride that, even just mental time, right? Thinking about those apartments and managing them and all those things, right? That you can't get back. And then probably through all the chaos of the couple of years of just madness, I think that I should have been more committed to spending some more time with the kids, or with my wife even then. And it's, it's paid forward now, but still you can't get that time back. Right. So is a daily podcast and working that hard worth it? Well, we've got past that now. But yeah, it's still gone,
Yeah. I mean, I think first of all, thanks for being kind of vulnerable there and honest. I mean, because I think, my wife has had a handful of times where she'll check me and just say, hey, you're not even here. When you're here, you're not here, or, that's one we've kind of talked about, or one is just like, hey, you got to dial it back. You can't be a guest on this mini podcast this next week or whatever it might be. And to have that lesson that you're willing to share that others can learn from, super valuable. Yeah. Early marriage. I have a similar story. I was actually on the road a lot. I worked in events and it was hard. Looking back, I wouldn't have been gone so much. You can't get that early time back again. Yeah. Thank God we made it for sure. My wife's incredible for kind of hanging on for some of the stuff, of course, but I appreciate you being vulnerable. So what is a mindset tip that you can give to our listeners that they can take away from the show?
There's so much about mindset. And I would say a couple things I would say is when I first started in this business, I didn't put time towards mindset. I didn't think it was that important. However, even from training from military and law enforcement, I didn't apply that well to entrepreneurship early on. And I even went to those conferences and people would talk about their mindset and their why, their mission, all those things. And I would my thought at that time was, oh, come on, let's get to the meat and potatoes. Give me some actionable steps here. This is, quit saying all this fluffy stuff. Right. And then, as I progressed, and learned more and read more books, educated myself, I'm like, okay, this just makes a ton of sense. And it is so important, your mindset, your attitude every day. It goes back to that consistency, how you wake up every morning. And I'm not saying it has to be early, but I'm just saying like your attitude every morning, every day, and the mindset behind that, and just understanding that it's a choice. People say, oh, I'm not a morning person or I'm not a whatever. Well, it's a choice. And so I guess that's what I would say about it is it's a choice.
No, that's incredibly powerful. And it's like at this conference, I was telling people about my podcast and a lot of people say that the mindset thing early on, it almost seemed like a waste of time. It was like, I don't have time to worry about that. I want to get to the meat, or whatever it might be. But I've learned, I think, thankfully, I mean, there's no other way to say than people I've learned from. It's not like I just came upon that. That they were saying, the success will change in your mind first. To have exactly what you said, an attitude, a belief, just a mindset that you can do it. And it is a choice. So awesome tip. So this in my opinion, is the most difficult. So the first part of this question is, how do you define success?
Yeah, that is a difficult question because that could be many things for many people, right? How do you define success? I had a close friend the other day. We're in another like entrepreneurial group together, kind of mastermind. I'm the only one in real estate in there. They all have other types of businesses. But he asked me, he said, are you a jet guy? And I'm like, at first I was like, well, what do you even mean? And he's like, does that define what success is to you? And like having that thing, right? Or have whatever the jet is for you, or whoever the listener is, is that what defines success for you? Because if it is, like, you're just never going to reach success, right? You're never going to be pleased, because then you're going to see the next bigger jet that somebody else has, right? And you're going to want that. And so, for me, I mean, the Lord has brought us so much success in our business, over the last, couple of years. I would say for us, it's been, we've reached a level of success that we never imagined. And a big part of how we've measured that is how we've been able to give. And I mean, it's just been incredible, to not only meet families now that we're able to partner with to help them bring their children home, but to partner in a big way. And I don't mean just a little bit, but I mean partner in a big way. And that's success, I think, for our family. I mean, the Lord's brought us, financially in a great place, all those things. But I just mean, when you can give though, and it just changes for you where you want to give, like different things happen, internally as much as externally, just something changes within you. And I mean, I think that's a better way for me to measure success.
I love what you just said, everything about it. So first of all, I completely agree. I mean, I've said this a lot on the show. If money, everyone wants a little more typically. But if you're driven by the jet, if you're driven by the car, my opinion, exactly what you said. You're never going to say, okay, cool, I made it. You might get your first jet and then you see, oh, well, there's a bigger Gulfstream. There's a faster car, so you got to keep driving. And so if those things, in my opinion, agree, they're just kind of somewhat meaningless in the end. But if you have a why, if you have a reason for the success, if you have a push to get there, seemingly it's so much more valuable. So yeah, I mean, and I did some mission work with a group called Youth of the Mission for several years. And I always said it, I gained as much out of it as any person I was helping or any mission we had. It's exactly what you said, is in your situation when you're giving, it's absolutely not selfish, not what I'm saying, but you're going to gain a lot out of it too. So those are the two takeaways I wanted to touch on. So that's awesome. And then the second part of this, again, is somewhat difficult. If someone asks you personally, why are you successful and not other investors? What is your response?
Only because of the work the Lord has done in our business. That is the only reason that I personally am successful. That's the only reason that, my wife and I were sustained, through working a schedule like that. Both of us, even our marriage, all those things, is only the Lord. And just to have the stamina. I mean, if I have to say one thing, that's it.
Yeah, love it. I love how you can be selfless and understand that sometimes the success comes from an external source. So love the answer. Well, that's all I have for you on the hot seat. So Whitney, how can people get a hold of you? How can they get in touch, find out more about what you're doing?
lifebridgecapital.com. You can email me, Whitney, at lifebridgecapital.com, or you can call or text 540-585-4338. Look forward to connecting with anyone.
Oh man, thank you so much. It's a true honor to have you on the show. Certainly appreciate you being here.
My pleasure, Eric. My honor.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Real Estate Mindset Podcast. If you've enjoyed the content today, please follow this show wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to head over to wildoakcapital.com for more information or to connect with Eric directly. Please take a moment to leave a review or tell a friend about what you've listened to today. We hope you'll tune in again soon.